important topic, and it's just nice that game devs also get to see the sign, like behind the scenes and not just like the game dev itself. And with that, we have two speakers here. For one, Asad Mehmood, the CEO of ConsoliAds, who declared himself a technology entrepreneur and works in the mobile applications industry. And he's like good in product development, technology implementation, marketing, and so much more that he can tell you himself in a couple of seconds. And the other panelist that we have is Alex Althoff, the head of MAS customer product service at Yoda One. He beforehand ran a design agency to like support small businesses, and now is like working on a customer support team to create first-class customer experience for devs. That's exactly what they told me about themselves. But I feel like if they want to add something, now would be a time.
I think you're the one who should moderate. So you want me to go first?
No, just like if I forgot anything important about you, feel free to add that now. That's what I was saying.
I think the introduction was pretty much short and simple, and I appreciate that. That's not a problem. Anyways, I would still tell. Being the founder of ConsoliAds, what we really do is we totally belong to games, mobile apps. We breathe mobile apps and games every now and then. And most of it, we always talk about how to monetize them in the best possible way. So what we really do is we just, anybody who uses ConsoliAds, we connect them to the best ad networks around the world. We make sure that our algorithms bring them the best money for their games or apps, so that the user experience is not distorted. At the same time, the feature set for the platform is very, very vast. We just make sure that all the ad-based management requirement is handled by us. The content creator has to just worry about beautiful and great content. They don't have to worry where the money is coming from. Neither do they have to worry how can they get traction or more acquisition for new users. That's what we really do.
That was very nice. And a good like overview of what you're doing. Alex, do you have anything to add to your introduction?
Very neat. Yeah, no, I mean, just like Asad, I also am working in a company that does monetization as one of the arms of what we do. There's not a whole lot more to add about me. I think you covered the key stuff, but yeah, we also have a similar platform, but Yoda One is actually a platform for developers to succeed in the industry, to create great games, and then to have all of the tasks related to running that game as a business taken care of. So like Consoli, we also have a monetization platform that takes all of the heavy lifting of monetization off of developers' backs. That's MAS, the product line that I'm responsible for. And then in addition, we have a series of educational content to help developers who are just starting out or getting their feet wet in game development. I think the last panelist was mentioning something about whether or not developers should go to four-year university. Well, the global reality is that they don't all. And so we want to make sure we're providing with a complete suite of educational and other tools they need to start from the ground up building a great game. And then once they get to the monetization part, that's where I come in and make sure that it runs as smoothly as possible. And from there on, there's a number of other tools we're developing to make sure that the whole business life cycle is covered. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited. Thank you, Natalie.
It's very nice to have both of you here because you're like working in very similar fields. So I feel like the conversation will be very interesting. About monetization, I looked up the Wikipedia definition just to make sure we're on the same terms. And broadly speaking, it's just the process of converting something into money. Now, that seems easy enough, but also it means like that there's various approaches, especially in games, to do that. And I wanted to ask you both, which ones have you tried before? And is there anything you want to try in the future to build into games to make money with them?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, monetization, because in the gaming industry, when we talk about monetization, historically, we've talked about in-app purchases, so buying things in the game, right? And then ad monetization, which is what Consoli and MAS are both designed for. But there's so many opportunities these days for developers to look at their game holistically, look at it beyond just a game. It's a brand. It's an experience that human beings around the world are interacting with. And just like Disney has figured out how to take a brand and monetize in a number of ways, merchandise, other experiences, connected universes, I think that there's so many cool opportunities to leverage the brand of the game itself. We do that at Yoda One, actually. We have a service called Brands and Games where we connect big brands to games, but in the future, we may also explore connecting smaller brands. And we've had some early success with that. So yeah, anything that has to do with taking the brand of a game and turning that into money beyond the traditional monetization definitions is something I'm up for. I think it's exciting.
If I just add a
Asad.
few things, I think Alex did a pretty good job already. Just a few. One is I just did a monetization presentation like I think last month for Moby Dictum's event. I would recall that for myself as well. It's primarily that monetization basically happens for people who don't know the details. It basically has two major ways to go about it. Number one, definitely you can show ads and earn money. That's called in-app ads. And the other one is called in-app purchases, where you just where you incentivize the users that they can just give their own virtual currencies or virtual in-app thingy for the people to purchase for X amount of, it could be directly dollars or any other virtual currency that they have. What I just talked about in the last presentation was primarily the fact that a lot of the people are now going to hybrid monetization. What does that mean is even for promoting their in-app purchase, they're using ads. See, so it's ads everywhere, right? So I have my own content. I want to now ask my own user to purchase this or unlock this in your game. And I'm again running an ad for that. So that's part of the hybrid monetization that is being done. It's kind of a latest thought process. We can talk about numbers once we start off discussing. I can tell you about the market size. I can tell you how the new regions are, which are the new regions that are playing a very important role in the monetization part.
As you already mentioned, in-app purchases, those are like most likely to happen in free-to-play games. And that's why I wanted to ask you both what your opinion on those is, or whether you would rather like try to still sell the money, like the game for money, and like how much of the income actually comes from those copy sales, and whether that's worth it, or whether you'd rather provide your game for free and try to make money with only monetization afterwards, because that's certainly an option.
Yeah, so basically the most of the use model is called it's freemium. That is, you download the game for free, but during the course of the game, you are required to spend money if you want to progress into the game. But the ones that you're talking about are called paid games or paid apps. I think the number of them is too less. It will be nothing more than 10%. So most of the games are generally freemium model. And that's why the publishers or the developers are very much interested in the monetization through in-app ads or in-app purchases.
And just specifically speak about mobile games there, right? Because not on Steam, I think most games are still paid.
Where?
Go ahead, Alex.
On Steam. Yeah, I can take this, Asad. It's on Steam, Natalie, there are some free games. It's really interesting because you actually see ad monetization, which Asad was mentioning earlier, on lots of platforms. I've seen it on internet-based games. I've seen it on, Windows. I'll confess, I'm a big solitaire player. And if you play Windows 10 Solitaire, you will always see an advertisement for another game or an advertisement for something else. So in-app advertising as a model is not limited to mobile. But there's another really good reason why it's important to consider freemium or free to play games as an alternative. And that is the reality that a lot of games are out there on the market. And so if you go through the trouble of building a very complex game that you hope people will pay for, you have to model up front and predict everything about that game's success. But if you build a free game and you build just enough to get an idea of whether or not players actually want to play it, and you launch it and you see, oh yeah, this is working, or I need to totally redo it, you save yourself a lot of time and effort. And I think that's why free to play is the dominant model and the model that's here to stay. Again, not just for mobile, but I think we'll see it more and more in other platforms as well. And I think it's really cool because it gives developers an opportunity to get something out there fast and experiment with it, and then work with a great partner to help improve it.
True, so like that goes hand in hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as
this
part
Asad,
as
you
part
can.
of even marketing your product, we need to understand what kind of a product we are talking about. So we're talking about games, right? So primarily that is these are leisure time thingy. So very seldom it happens that you actually want to spend on the leisure time. So what's the best way? Just get an easy free access to something, and then you really enjoy it. You start spending on that.
Yeah, like the biggest non-mobile thing I was thinking about would be like MMO games because they've been like free to play for the longest time, but you like start buying like costumes and like looks and more weapons and
Absolutely.
whatever in the game. So like those
I-
in-game like shops as well work, right? Does your company or like both of your companies actually provide those in-game shop features as well?
Mm.
For ConsoliAds, the interesting part is we provide in-game in-app purchase campaigns. So which means all the stores and all the currency that you have made for your game, you can actually promote it directly within your game through ConsoliAds. What else can you do in ConsoliAds in terms of those kind of paying models is basically you can even promote your in-app feature campaign. You can do an in-app feature campaign. For example, you're standing at one point in time in your game and you say, I want to promote this feature right now. So it's going to click on the ad and it's going to take up to that feature instantly so the user can take action on that. So that's how the advertising era is evolving itself. So it's not just an ad to be shown by an external entity in your game. Rather, an ad is more of an information now and a very good way to represent that. Soon you're going to see ads by ConsoliAds that are going to get embedded in the 3D environment. It's a trademark ads that we have. You'll see ads in the 3D environment of the game. For example, if you're walking around a building will have ad on top of the on the top. So it will not be a disruptive ad at all. It will be part of the game itself.
Mm. That's so cool, Asad. Yeah, actually, I was also on a panel last month with AddInMo, which is another non-intrusive ad platform. It's very interesting to watch this form of monetization develop. I think it's still in the early stages, hard to calculate the value of a given app like or ad like that, but it's definitely something that players are yearning for, right? An ad experience that's not disruptive. However, getting the model right for developers and making it as easy as possible. I think we're a long way off before we actually get there. Yodel One, to answer your question, Natalie, does have a number of other products that would assist developers, either in development already out there. So, one thing that's very important is for a developer to consider their whole economy, as Asad was mentioning, right? This idea that some ads will drive traffic to IAPs to get developers to play it. Well, if a developer doesn't know how to build a good game economy, then they're going to need some guidance on that. And we do provide a reporting software that called Ad Hoc that actually analyzes the developer's game and finds the optimal points based on other market leaders for their genre. So that's one thing we do. Another thing we have, Asad mentioned something similar, is we have a service called KT Play, which promotes different features within the game. So it might be used to promote a specific set of IPs. It might be used to promote social interaction. It might be used to promote another game. Yeah, we are working on this. And then finally, we're looking into the possibility of eventually being able to recommend to a developer how to market their IAPs to specific subsets of their players that are going to pay more. These whales, as we call them in the industry, people who would definitely jump at spending more money in a game. So essentially by creating an AI recommendation engine to guide developers on how to make it more interesting for those developers to select that IAP as opposed to, for specific players, as opposed to the whole audience, so they can maximize their effort without maximize the minimal amount of effort. I mean, yeah. So we've got a lot of excitement. Yeah. We're excited.
Like I think it's mad. Like it probably needs a lot of like saving data of your customers as well. But I mean, if as long as it's game data. And actually, as we're speaking about like non-intrusive ads, I had like one question prepared for way later, but I can ask it now. What is your opinion on like things like loot boxes? Because they're like potentially addicting and I think even like about to be banned in some countries because of gambling. Like, do you use those kind of monetization options or would you rather avoid them?
So I'm always of the opinion you should let the developer decide. Mass as a product doesn't have anything to do with loot boxes because loot boxes are essentially a form of IAP. And we don't directly provide, in-game stores as you were mentioning earlier. However, I would always counsel a developer to think carefully about the legal ramifications of a certain feature. Within mobile, I've not heard that much negative press about loot boxes or anything like them. It's really on desktop. So it doesn't touch the industry that we interact with, but I'm sure for others it might be important. And like I said, it's always at the what's the right word? Concern of the developer to consider the best path forward for them. We're here to help every step of the way, but they need to make the decision.
Asad, do you have an opinion on that?
I'm sorry that I had a few voice cut in between. So I think you're talking about the pillbox, is it?
We were talking about loot boxes because they're like closely related to gambling at some point, and we're like, okay, this is a critical feature, and like we are just talking about whether you would want to help with that or how you would advise developers to go around that.
So Asad, we can hear you.
Can you give me like 10 seconds? I just need to rectify the internet as well.
No worries, we have time. I can actually ask a question to Alex in the meantime that I prepared, because you offer customer support, right? So if one of the viewers came to you and asked for like general advice about monetization, where would you start? Because it seems like such a big topic.
Yes, sorry, can you repeat the question? I heard most of it, but then just the last part. What was the advice about?
Like, where would you start when a viewer came to you? Because I feel like it's such a big topic, and if you had like, I don't know, 10 minutes time of just like chat on the hallway that would happen at a conference, what would you tell them?
I got you. Yeah. What would I tell them? Well, the first thing is I wouldn't tell anything because I'm big on asking questions. I would ask them about the genre of their game. And I would try and get some idea for what it is. And then the next question I would have is, how are your downloads? How is your retention? Because these are important metrics, right? If the developer comes to me and says, well, my downloads are 5 million and my retention is 50% on day 1 and 25% on day 5, it'd be like, well, I don't think you should talk to me anymore. Call our publishing team. But if they say my downloads are 50, my retention is maybe 10% on day 1, then we have a very different conversation. It would probably be about, well, are you testing different versions of your game to see how players are reacting? Are you have you considered what are the trends in the market for games like yours? Maybe if it's a simulation game, how similar is your simulation game? And why I would talk about this and not monetization is because the reality is that monetization on a game that is not performing well on some core metrics is going to struggle regardless, right? It's important to remember that these games are still games people play. And one of the things we're working on Yoda One is how can we help developers get through that hurdle first, the hurdle of getting enough attention to make it worthwhile for them not to have ads in their game. I think you should always remember that from day one, you want to have a monetization strategy. But in addition, how can you, once you've got those ads in your game, how can you make the game as interesting for your players as possible so that you see the growth you need to continue growing your revenue?
That's a very good answer. Especially because I can imagine that like someone that actually comes up to you just wants like advice, and that would be the best advice that you can give. Just like, do over and try again. So I kind of like that. And I hope the viewers take this away from this conversation. What else do we have here?
Just a little bit on
Asad?
that.
Yeah, perfect. You're back. I just wanted to ask.
No issues. So just a bit on that. I think the approach was really good by what Alex said. Generally, what happens is people sometimes, I think, they fall for metrics as well for a while. So, for example, they would start, if you start asking them what is the retention, what is your DAU, what is your MAU, and at the end of the day, then they ask, what is the LTV that you're having? And I know the LTV is a very different metric, a difficult metric to calculate, right? So I would say there's a slight what you call a secret recipe kind of thing that we tell to the users. It's basically, I think, a very much a key based on the retention of the game. So how we tell about that is, if your retention, so for example, assume how many days after, how many days it takes for your users to come down to 10%. That could be a threshold to understand that today everything goes down, your users will fall slowly and steadily, and till that day they're going to keep giving you money before the end of your game, before your game goes to zero revenues. So we basically tell people that you can account for that metric and spend that much on the advertising as well. So you can spin the loop unless you start getting organic downloads, right? That loops get you more organic downloads. And again, the eventually effect of an organic download becomes more exponential, and the monetization eventually gets better. The retention rates might not get better, but the monetization has the chances of getting better. So these are few things that kind of work with kind of calculations, and I think can, as just a slight disagreement with Alex, is that it's not necessarily that you have to have brilliant numbers to get brilliant monetization. You can keep on rolling the ball, and it might turn out to be brilliant because the organic downloads might put it.
Very
I think
true.
we're both not so much disagreeing than like acting upon each other and like expanding in different areas. So I kind of like that. Speaking of Asad, now that you're back, are there specific strategies for the mobile branch of game dev compared to what we talked about with Alex earlier, things on Steam? Like, what is something that's only working on mobile?
That's only working on mobile is primarily, I think, I would talk about few ad formats, I think. I don't know if there are too many of a playable ads in any other console-based or other kind of a gaming platform. Playable ads are something that has recently taken up pretty well. And even if I turn about the stats, we had a few stats on that. So they account for quite a major chunk of the whole, what you call advertising, the what you call engagement numbers. So they are around 50% utilized now. They have seen a very good growth. Apart from that, the good part of it's again the ad formats that make a difference. And on a smartphone, on the mobile, the interactivity with ads has a broader spectrum as opposed to one that you can get on the other consoles. What other things that change specifically for the mobile are more options, just because the device is in your hand. There's more engagement stuff. One is the ad format, and the other is basically the placement as well. Since there's a variety of ad formats, there's a variety of placements available as well then. I think that's very much specific to the smartphone or the mobile small screen environment.
Yeah, I can imagine playing a console game and being interrupted by an ad will probably cause an uprising. So that definitely is a difference. Speaking of console games, like the biggest way that I was used to spending more money on a game that I already bought were DLCs. Are they still a thing? And are they a thing on mobile? Because I don't think I've seen them there, like downloadable content that you can buy after the game to expand on it.
Didn't get that. Can you come again with the question?
Are DLCs a thing that works on mobile, and DLCs in general? Do they provide enough money? Are they worth the extra development effort?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think even if you've seen quite a big games that have a version of the mobile itself as well, no? I have been playing games for quite a while now, and I quite now and then keep on seeing the versions for different versions for mobile itself. What was the recent one that I played? Mortal Kombat, probably. It's a big variance, no? A very different experience in the console itself, but has its own experience in mobile. And I'm not sure it's by what called DC Games. No, it's by Realm, the other Realm. So those guys might have been making more in-app purchases to this one as opposed to what they did on console. Could be a possibility. But on the other hand, why consoles get a better response in terms of that would be the only fact that they're paid by default. However, in mobile, you struggle for a bit of in-app purchase. But at the end of the day, you see conversions. You would see, and I think eventually the old Sega, Nintendo-based games. I just saw, oh yeah, my son plays Mario. though it's not the same Mario world that we have on Nintendo Switch, but it has its own version on the mobile, and it's pretty much engaging itself as well.
That is nice. Mobile games is an extension to a console game. That's something I didn't think about before. Also, Alex, I noticed you wanted to say something to that as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we see it the other way around as well with our mass customers. So basically what will happen is they will use mobile as a proving ground, right? Because the audience is huge. And if they can make a success on mobile, it means that then they can do cross-platform with that, take it into a number of other platforms. And I think it's a little different than DLC. So we also see DLC in the form of developers succeeding again with a single game, monetizing that game, and then trying to build expansion packs for that game, or even just sequels, right? And ultimately, these sequels are like DLCs in the sense that it's just an extension of the chapters of the game. So a lot of our mass customers, what they'll do is they'll validate and succeed with one concept, and then they'll continue forward with that concept either onto another platform or onto a further game that's just really, as I said, an extension of the original one. Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, like, again, it makes sense that you would like use the concept and expand on it in a way of like sequels. That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Speaking of sense and practical experiences, someone asked me to ask you guys whether you have any practical things that you want to tell us about, like something that happened in the past, what worked, what didn't, and how successful you were with specific things. Just anything that comes to mind right now.
Yeah, I can take this. So one thing that's really important, and I think it's easy to lose track of among all of the other parts of running a business, is compliance, legal compliance, right? Ultimately, it's not exciting, it's not fun, but there are laws that are evolving in the mobile games industry to make sure that or I shouldn't say laws, policies from Google, from Apple, to comply with the different laws of different countries and regions, especially Europe, GDPR, right? So we had an interesting experience last year when Apple released their ATT policy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but essentially it was a way of protecting users who didn't want to give away their private data to ad networks, right? An ad network will use that data to create a more targeted ad experience. And a lot of developers were in the dark about how to handle this. So one of the things we did at Yoda One early is we figured out how to make this a part of our mass product, so the developers didn't need to think about it. And we partner with 14 different ad networks, and sometimes we bring on more. And a lot of them got caught, excuse me for my language, with their pants down because they weren't ready for this policy when the rollout came. But for us, because we made sure that developers were ready, they didn't even need to think about it. And to date, we always strive with compliance to make sure that developers are well prepared so that they don't end up getting a Google Play rejection or an Apple App Store rejection because they've missed something policy-wise. So I would always advise developers to a certain extent keep up on policy or make sure you're partnering with someone who knows policy well. It's important.
That definitely should be a key takeaway from today. Asad, do you have anything to say to that as well?
In terms of policies, I think that's a very important aspect to just take care of. It's just like you go to Walmart and you walk into the store and there's some policies you just don't agree with and you're not following them. Walmart wants you to kick you out, not just because you're not a good buyer. It's just because you're not complying with it. So
like not wearing a mask or something.
Yeah, exactly, right. At the same time, you also have the right, you walk in, nobody has the right to take your wallet out from your pocket. Nobody can do that unless you want them to. It's a very similar scenario, right? But at the same time, there is another policy document, which Alex did not talk about, was the app-ads.txt file. It's a very interesting way to even safeguard the interest of an advertiser as well. So that, so look which involved parties are involved: the advertiser, the publisher, that is the developer of the game, or the end user, right? So at the end of the day, the whole ecosystem is being generated through the spending of the advertiser, right? So we need to understand it's not only safeguarding the interest of the end user, it's also the safeguarding the interest of the advertiser as well, the guy who's actually spending money to show ads. So appads.txt is a very good mechanism. I think I remember that it was a mechanism that was used for web previously, but this has been boiled down to the mobile platform as well, where you mention the exact direct sellers or the resellers of the ads, the demand side. And I think it's a good way to comply with that as well, so that even the developers should be careful of not doing any fraudulent activity in terms of the ads as well. So I think that was the only part missed by Alex. Otherwise, GDPR compliance, CCPA, COPA, all these compliances are just being made to safeguard the interests of the user, and even to the fact that family-oriented games, yeah, that's another one. Google and App Store, all these stores have a very separate policy for family games. So like children, I think below 7 years of age, they're not very much what you call intelligent enough to identify an ad versus a game content. And that's where they happen to go out of the app itself, which is, I think, something that needs to be protected, and that's well protected by these laws.
Yeah, it's funny, Asad. I left out appads.txt because Euro1 has an automated solution for that, because we don't want to put developers through the headache of having to worry about it too much. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so important, and it's one of those things that, again, you have to have a good policy partner, right? Because there are so many policies and it's always changing. If you don't have a partner who's on top of it, then you have to be on top of it and you might miss it. So that's indeed another aspect of that we always are looking out for our developers on. Yeah.
I mean, definitely no developer is a lawyer. I think if they went to college, they probably went for programming and not for, like, reading texts and understanding them and ever changing, looking at them. So it's definitely good to have a partner for that. And also, I love how you just like throw questions at me back that I can ask you, because now speaking about ads and protecting kids, there has been in the past some questionable ads, and like, especially from certain app networks. Do you filter them, and how do you react when a customer comes to you with like, I don't like the ad that is playing, I don't want this content in my game? Can you filter that for them?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have two methods for that, and we think it's really important. The first is, by default, we have an SDK that's designed, so another version of our mass product that's designed for games that are targeting children, and that will automatically filter out those unacceptable ads. That is something that we realized early on was going to be important as the laws and the policies were becoming stricter and stricter. And at the same time, unfortunately, some of the ad networks were not really caring about, it's a big issue today. Then the other step is that there, of course, are those developers who don't target children explicitly, but then have players who are in their teenage years, maybe 13, 12, and they're a little bit sensitive about the content they want as well. And for that, we have created a solution in partnership with one of our big ad networks that allows us to identify ads in the system either prior to or on the first showing, and then block them. If all else fails and a developer still has some very specific requests, they can always reach out to us and we can manually block. But yeah, we take a lot of steps to make sure that the ad experience is appropriate for our players, or for our developers' players, I should say.
Yeah, I was about to ask, because like sometimes it can also be political content that you're just trying to keep out of your game, or like homophobic content that you don't want because in your country it's something that's very normal, but like, some ads will still have that like content that you don't want them on them. So I'm glad to hear that like developers can have a say in what's playing on their game in that kind of sense. Asad,
Yeah.
I think I heard you trying to say something as well.
Yeah. That's a very important feature, by the way. You can never neglect that. Because what you do is, just as I said, there are the rights that have to be respected for all three parties: the advertiser, as well as the publisher, as well as the user as well, right? So in terms of these ad filters, at the same time, the developer also has the right to say, no, I don't want to have these ads on my app. There's an equal possibility that the developer or the publisher of that content could be a personal, liking as well. So for example, there are a few very region-specific publishers. They come up with very, very different kind of requirements. So for example, an app would say, I don't want to see the ads from any e-commerce people showing that on my app. I don't know why, but this could be one person liking as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or for any religion-based app, or they would say we don't want these kind of content to be shown. So which means it has to be respected. So that portion or that part of the equation is very important as well. So even in ConsoliAds, you can pick and choose. You can provide ad filters to your game. So it's very interesting to see how the whole filtering actually enables a good user experience as well. The publisher can filter ads, the compliance policies can filter ads, the advertiser can pick and choose which app or mobile games they want to advertise on, and the user can eventually say, I want to see the ad or not.
That is very nice, and actually ties in perfectly with the question I just saw in chat, because the size of your SDK will grow with the amount of features you have. How do you handle that? Like the panelist that was asking that was afraid of control and avoiding clashes, especially with like the game content itself.
We have been working on, I'm sorry that Alex, I'm cutting you because of the answer was like very intuitive for me. We have been thoroughly working on that. So what happens is, it's just like, again, another example. You put your big plasma TV on an electronic store, and one fine day when you go to the store, it keeps on crashing, and people are not able to see that. And the store would say, man, this is a crappy TV, get it out of our store. That's exactly what happens when you do on Google Play or any of the other app store. Crashes and ANRs are the vitals that usually any of the developer would not want them to be in their games. We have primarily specifically worked for like a good number of months to make sure every time we release a new SDK, ANRs or crashes are not a problem at all, should not be a problem at all. So there are multiple reasons behind them, but we still try to minimize them, specifically the crashes, because we need to tell to the developers that ANRs, that is application not responding, can primarily come because of the game itself as well. So it's not necessarily because of ads. Yeah, because the application is not responding because you did something previously. Now you added an ad on that, which actually made it more heavier.
Yeah.
At the same time, you talked about the SDK size. How many clothes can you get in your suitcase? It all depends, right? So I'm gonna travel to a place there's winters. So would you really need to have summer clothes in them or autumn clothes in them? That's the only choice. How many SDKs do you really want? As per my experience, what we have been doing for quite a number of years now, a mediation with over 4 to 5 ad networks solves the equation. It has a very good SDK size as well as a very good monetization strategy as well. So in games, we are talking about adding somewhere around 4 to 5 MBs at max. And in apps, we are just talking about 1.5 to 2 MB at max.
Perfect. You answered the second question that came up as well. Alex, do you have something to say to that?
Nice.
Well?
Yeah, no, I'm right on the same page with Asad. First of all, making sure that ANR and crashes are not an issue for developers is a priority for us too. And in addition, I think it's really important when a developer is worried about conflicts to make sure that you're communicating clearly via support. So one of the things that we do at Yoda One, and this is actually what I was involved with when your original description that you read way back, is to build a world-class support team to make sure that if a developer does run into issues, because let's be real, it's going to happen when you're adding an SDK to your game sometime, right? I used to be a web developer, and even in web development, you want to use a new tool in order to achieve something. You'll bring the code in and then boom, everything falls apart. And if you don't have anybody there to answer your questions, then you are really in trouble because you get stuck, you get lost. So what we did at Yoda One is we said, okay, we're going to continue to optimize on this indefinitely, right? Because it's a never-ending challenge to make sure that your SDK has as few conflicts and as easy to use as possible. I think that even today, we work with third parties, IronSource, AppLovin, AdMob, all of them have this issue. But where we wanted to make things different for our developers to say, hey, if you have this, we'll step in and we'll help you. We'll make sure that you are not spending any extra time trying to figure this out, because it's an inevitability, but what doesn't need to be an inevitability is being stuck. So I think that's what I add to that. Yeah.
And having emails not answered. I appreciate that a lot, because as a developer, you just start Googling, you don't find a solution. And if you just can call, I think that's a good service to offer. Speaking of service and time, we actually reached the end of the tunnel with having lots of questions left in the Q&A and the chat. So if you have any time later, you can still go in there and answer them by text.